The Galactic Combat Academy's firing range fell silent as Cadet Sarah Chen unpacked her equipment. Around her, aliens from a dozen species watched with barely concealed amusement. The Krillian beside her, all 8 feet of scaled muscle, chittered something that the universal translator rendered as mockery. "That's your weapon?" Lieutenant Vex Thor, a 4-armed Zenthari instructor, leaned closer to examine Sarah's rifle. His mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. No plasma coils? No graviton accelerators? Not even basic energy shielding? Sarah didn't respond. She methodically assembled her M110 semi-automatic sniper system, a weapon that would have been considered outdated even by Earth's 21st century standards. In an era where most species wielded beam weapons and antimatter projectors, her chemical propellant firearm looked like a museum piece. The other cadets whispered among themselves. The Vryn delegation, beings of pure thought housed in crystalline exoskeletons, transmitted their derision directly into everyone's minds. Primitive kinetic weapon. Probability of success 0.003%. Commander Thrace, the human liaison officer, stood at the back of the range with his arms crossed. His weathered face remained expressionless, but his eyes held a knowing glint. "Attention." Vex Thor's voice boomed across the range. "Today's qualification is simple. 10 targets at varying distances, 5 shots per target. Energy weapons on full charge. Kinetic weapons." He glanced at Sarah with what passed for a smirk among his people. "Whatever ancient rituals they require." The targets materialized downrange, holographic projections backed by reactive armor plates. They flickered and danced, simulating enemy movement patterns. The closest was 300 meters. The farthest was nearly 2 kilometers away, barely visible even with enhanced optics. The Krillian went first. His plasma rifle hummed to life, spitting bolts of superheated matter downrange. The near targets exploded satisfyingly, but the distant ones proved challenging. His shots curved in the wind. Affected by atmospheric conditions, his weapon's computer struggled to calculate. Final score 73% accuracy. One by one, the cadets took their turns. The Vryn achieved 81% with their thought-guided antimatter beams. A Draconid warrior, using what appeared to be weaponized solar flares, managed 78%. Even the lowest score was 65%, respectable by any standard. Then it was Sarah's turn. She approached the firing line with her rifle cradled comfortably in her arms. No powered armor. No targeting AI. Just her, the weapon, and a small notebook filled with handwritten calculations. "Begin when ready," Vex Thor announced, his tone suggesting this would be mercifully quick. Sarah dropped to a prone position, the rifle settling against her shoulder like an old friend. She pulled out a small device, not a targeting computer, but a weather meter. Wind speed, humidity, barometric pressure. She jotted numbers in her notebook with a pencil. The Krillian chittered again. "She's doing math? Manually?" Sarah's first shot cracked across the range. The sound, a sharp percussive bang, made several aliens flinch. They were used to the hum and whine of energy weapons, not the brutal honesty of chemical explosions. The first target's center mass shattered. Perfect hit. She worked the bolt, breathed, calculated. The second shot rang out, another direct hit. By the third target, the whispers had stopped. By the fifth, everyone was watching intently. Sarah's movements were almost meditative. Observe, calculate, adjust, breathe, fire. Each shot was preceded by tiny adjustments to her scope, microscopic shifts in her position. The sixth target was at 800 meters, dancing in thermal shimmer. Sarah paused longer this time, her eyes unfocused as she read the wind, felt the weight of air pressure, factored in the Coriolis effect of the planet's rotation. Her finger squeezed the trigger with practiced precision. The bullet flew true. Center mass. Commander Thrace allowed himself a small smile. The final 4 targets were at maximum range, nearly 2 kilometers downrange. At this distance, most energy weapons lost cohesion or accuracy. Even the Vryn's antimatter beams had scattered. Sarah made her calculations with the same unhurried patience. She adjusted for bullet drop, nearly 20 meters at this range. She accounted for the crosswind that had picked up. She even factored in the slight differences in atmospheric composition compared to Earth standard. The first distant target fell, then the second, third, fourth. When the last target shattered, the range was silent except for the fading echo of the shot. Perfect score. Vex Thor's voice was barely a whisper. 100% accuracy. That's impossible. No one scores perfect at this range. Not even with— He stopped mid-sentence, suddenly understanding something. He walked over to Sarah as she stood and cleared her weapon. His multiple eyes studied her face with new respect. "Cadet Chen," he said quietly, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "What you just did, those calculations, that consistency, that control, only marksmen can do that. True marksmen." Sarah slung her rifle over her shoulder. "With respect, sir, you're wrong." The instructor's mandibles twitched in confusion. "Wrong? Not only marksmen," she said, her voice carrying across the range now. "Only humans." The Krillian stepped forward. "I don't understand. Our weapons are superior, faster, more powerful." "Why?" Commander Thrace finally spoke up. "Because your weapons do the thinking for you. They compensate, they adjust, they aim. You just point and shoot." He gestured to Sarah. "She has to understand ballistics, meteorology, physics, biology, her own biology, her heartbeat, her breathing. Every shot requires dozens of calculations performed in seconds." "But that's inefficient," the Vryn transmitted. "Why not let computers—" "Because computers can be hacked, disabled, jammed," Sarah interrupted. "My rifle doesn't need a power source. It doesn't emit a targeting signature. It works in EMP zones underwater, in vacuum with the right rounds. And most importantly," and she smiled, "it makes me better. Every shot teaches me something. Makes me more aware, more precise." Vexthor nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "The weapon doesn't make the warrior. The warrior makes the weapon." "Exactly, sir." The instructor turned to address all the cadets. "What you witnessed today is why humans, despite their relatively recent arrival in the galactic community, have some of the finest snipers and marksmen in known space. They turned their limitations into strengths. They made an art form out of necessity." He looked back at Sarah. "Cadet Chen, you've just set a new academy record. And you did it with a weapon my ancestors would have considered primitive when yours were still deciding which cave to sleep in." Sarah smiled. "My grandmother always said the best weapon is the one you've mastered. Technology is wonderful, sir, but skill is eternal." As the other cadets crowded around to examine her rifle and notebook, Sarah caught Commander Thrace's eye. He gave her a subtle nod of approval. In a galaxy full of plasma rifles and antimatter cannons, sometimes the oldest song still sang the truest. And humanity's song was written in gunpowder and precision.